Every time Russia is cornered, the same sentence appears in the West like a reflex. What if Putin uses nukes? And the reason that fear is so powerful is simple. Most people picture a movie scene, a briefcase, a red button, one man's finger, one moment of madness. But nuclear war doesn't work like a movie. So tonight, I want to separate two things that are constantly blended together: the real danger and the fear tactic. Russia's nuclear threat is extremely effective as political leverage. It slows decisions, limits support for Ukraine, and trains Western leaders to talk about escalation as if it's a weather forecast. But the idea that Putin can simply press a button and end the world is not only terrifying, it's also misleading. And it's exactly the story the Kremlin wants you to believe. I'm Elvira Bary. I was born in the Soviet Union, where we were raised on the opposite myth that the crazy ones with nukes lived across the ocean. Today, the myth is reversed, and it keeps shaping policy in Europe and the United States. Before we begin, a quick note. With a name like Elvira and a face that doesn't look quite Russian or anything obvious, I get this question constantly. What is your ethnicity? And honestly, I've always wondered myself. My family lived all over the old Soviet space, and nobody ever kept proper records. So when my heritage reached out and offered their DNA service, something that breaks down your origins across 42 ethnicities and over 2,000 regions, I jumped at the chance. Because I want to know the truth too. Quick note before we continue. I partnered with MyHeritage for this video, so this segment is a paid collaboration. And here's the deal up front. With my code Elvira, the MyHeritage DNA kit is $29 with free shipping. Use the link below. It'll be the first thing in the description and in the pinned comment. So here's how simple the process was. I take the first swab, scrape inside my cheek for about 60 seconds, just like they tell you. Then the swab goes into the vial. Cap tightly sealed. And then straight into the prepared return envelope. That's it. Okay, moment of truth. I'm opening the email now. All right, here we go. Baltic, 56.3%. Eastern European, 25.3%. Together, that's 82%. And both of those groups include Russian. So that part isn't surprising. That tracks. Then, Finnish, 8.7%. And that actually makes sense. My official last name, Baryakina, comes from the Erze language. Erze is a Finno-Ugric ethnic group that lives in the Mordovia region, to the south of my native city, Nizhny Novgorod. So there's a real connection here. But Balkan, 8.7%, surprised me. I genuinely didn't know about this side of my family. And then 1% Greek and Albanian, which is just enough for me to picture some Greek trader passing through Russia a long time ago and making very questionable decisions. And for context, MyHeritage gives you an ethnicity estimate across 42 ethnicities and 2,114 geographic regions. So it's not just a vague label. And then you get DNA matches, potential relatives based on shared DNA. I'm blurring names, of course, but it's still surreal to see who pops up. And one more important thing. MyHeritage has committed in its privacy policy to never sell or license genetic data. All right, now back to the story. Now, here's our roadmap. Policy of fear. How the Kremlin uses nuclear bluff to steer Western choices. The childhood trauma, why this threat hits older generations especially hard. Flipping the story, how Soviet propaganda built the same fear in reverse. The button is people. What has to happen for any launch to become real? They love their life. Why Russian elites have strong reasons not to cross that line, even if he orders it. The worst case scenario, step by step. If independent long-form analysis like this matters to you, please like and subscribe. And if you want to support this channel directly, you can use PayPal or Superthanks. It helps keep this work independent. Let's start with the part that matters most, how fear becomes policy. Policy of fear. The West wants one thing more than victory or even justice. It wants to stay alive. It wants to avoid a moment where one decision turns into a chain reaction and you don't get a second chance. That motive is rational. It's also a predictable weakness. If you can make your opponent feel personally responsible for nuclear escalation, you can steer their choices without firing a shot. You don't have to win an argument. You just have to trigger fear, and fear will do the rest. You can see this in how leaders talk in public. In March 2022, Joe Biden said a direct confrontation between NATO and Russia was something the United States must strive to prevent. That line marked boundaries. It told everyone that helping Ukraine was the right thing to do, but a certain kind of help was off the table. A hard no to anything that could provoke the Kremlin into nuclear escalation, like giving Ukraine long-range weapons or creating a no-fly zone. And you can watch the Kremlin jump on every move. In May 2024, when the US allowed Ukraine to use American weapons against targets inside Russia near Kharkov, Moscow answered with warnings about dangerous escalation, plus the usual nuclear hints. In late 2024, when the United States authorized Ukraine to use long-range ATACMS for deep strikes inside Russia, the reporting was explicit about the earlier hesitation. The administration had resisted expanding how weapons could be used because it feared escalation with a nuclear-armed Russia. Germany has lived inside the same logic. For years of this war, Berlin's public argument was prudence and the fear of being pulled closer to direct conflict with Russia. That framing shows up again and again around Taurus missiles and other long-range systems. Moscow threatens, Western leaders take a step, then spend weeks explaining why the next step would be too risky. And here's the ugly part. The threat works even when nothing happens. The Kremlin doesn't need to launch anything. It only needs Western leaders to hesitate, to slow roll, to admit their fear in public. That's how Russia wins time and stalls Ukraine's advance. And the West trains itself to treat Russian nuclear talk as a weather forecast instead of a tactic. A lever that the Kremlin keeps pulling because it works. The childhood trauma. To understand why this lever works, you have to remember something basic. Politicians are not spreadsheets. They are people. And the people running America and Europe today grew up with nuclear fear baked into their childhood. In the United States, there is a famous little artifact from the early Cold War, Duck and Cover. It's a civil defense film aimed at kids, built around a cartoon turtle named Bird. The film shows a bright flash, then children drop under their school desks, cover their heads, and wait. It is simple, it is catchy, and it carries a message. The bomb can come any day, so you should be ready and know what to do. Then you'll stand a chance to survive, however small. This material arrived in every American classroom for a reason. After the Soviet Union tested its first bomb in 1949, fear spiked, and Congress created the Federal Civil Defense Administration in 1950. That's when civil defense became a school subject, like fire drills, only darker. Britain had its own version of the same drill. In the late 1970s and 1980s, the British government prepared Protect and Survive, a campaign built around a booklet, broadcasts, and short films. The booklet's foreword says it would be disturbed to every household if the country faced an immediate threat of nuclear war. It tells you to prepare your home, to create an inner refuge, to plan for what you do after strike. Basically, your government is telling you as a parent that you might need to turn your living room into a shelter. If you were a child in the 1960s, 1970s, or 1980s, this was not some abstract theory. It was in the air. The sound of the teacher's voice getting a little too serious. The way adults said, if the sirens go off, and try to sound calm, which only made it worse. And this is the generation that later became ministers, presidents, and advisors. So when Russia threatens nuclear war today, it plugs into a very old wiring. The threat doesn't have to be credible in a technical sense to feel credible emotionally. It hits the part of the brain that remembers the duck under the desk drills. And here is the key question. If a threat works because it triggers childhood panic, are you still making a strategic choice? Or are you just reacting? Flipping the story. In the West, nuclear fear is often packaged as Russians are irrational. But in the Soviet Union, this emotional story was flipped. The irrational ones were Americans. The system needed that story because it was a dictatorship that demanded obedience. Fear is the easiest way to get it. So the Soviet public didn't live inside a constant sermon about our nuclear greatness. What it lived inside was a constant sermon about American aggression. The world you saw again and again was the same, imperialists. It was a convenient label. If the enemy is an imperialist, then every US move is automatically a step toward war, and every Soviet move is automatically defense. That framing matters for one simple reason. If you want your people calm and loyal, you don't tell them, we almost ended the world last week. You tell them, the other side is dangerous, but we are strong, and we will not blink. This is why the Cuban Missile Crisis, the moment Americans remember as the closest brush with nuclear war, sits strangely in Soviet memory. Even its name is different. In Russian discourse, it's often the Caribbean crisis. And the public-facing message leaned hard on the idea that the USSR was helping Cuba defend itself against US pressure, not gambling with global survival. I'm not saying Soviet citizens were relaxed. They weren't, but their fear was pointed outward. In school, in newspapers, in speeches, the moral lesson was clear. The Americans might do something stupid, so we must be vigilant. And this wasn't just propaganda for the masses. The leadership believed it too. In the early 1980s, the KGB ran an operation to detect signs of a Western first strike. Andropov, before he became general secretary, pushed the services to treat the risk as real, even without hard evidence. There's a quote that captures the mindset perfectly. In 1983, Andropov warned about nuclear miscalculation and said that at the bottom could be a drunken American surgeon or a drug addict. That's not analysis. That's a horror story. The bottom is people. Now, let's kill the most popular myth in this whole topic. There's no magic red button that one man taps in a fit of emotion, like it's an elevator. Nuclear weapons are a system, a bureaucracy, a chain of custody, a set of procedures. Russia's nuclear briefcase is real. It's commonly called the jacket. But the important part isn't the suitcase. It's what it connects to. Secure networks are used to communicate orders. The president has constant access to the briefcase, yes, but other top officials have briefcases too. There's no one finger, one button, one apocalypse. The one madman story is believed by many because it's emotionally satisfying. It makes the problem feel simple. But reality is messy and, in a way, more hopeful. To make a nuclear strike real, a lot of humans have to cooperate in sequence under stress. And humans hesitate. Humans argue. Humans decide they don't want to die today. That is not theory. We have real examples from history that proves this point. In September 1983, a Soviet early warning system reported what looked like a US missile attack. The officer on duty was Stanislav Petrov. He judged the alarm as a false one and chose not to escalate it up the chain as an incoming strike. Later, investigators concluded it really was a malfunction. Then there is January 25, 1995. Norway launched a scientific rocket to study the aurora. Russian radar interpreted the flight profile as something that could resemble a US missile. The alert climbed high. Boris Yeltsin was brought the jacket. For several minutes, Russia's leadership faced the tough decision. And then the system stood down. That's what nuclear risk often looks like in real life. Confusion, time pressure, and imperfect sensors. So when you ask, could Putin order a strike? You also have to ask, how does an order move through a system that has already experienced false alarms? How many people along the line are thinking about their children, their own survival? That doesn't mean accidents are impossible. It means the core danger is not Russians are crazy. The core danger is miscalculation, misreading, and leaders using fear as leverage. They love their life. If you want to predict someone's behavior, look at their lifestyle. Putin and the people around him are not monks. They are not suicidal saints. They are men who build a whole ecosystem of comfort, secrecy, and private pleasure. And they build it for the long haul. Here's the most famous symbol, the Black Sea Palace near Gelendzhik that Alexei Navalny's team publicized in 2021, with an estimated price tag in the billions of rubles. It allegedly belonged to Putin, and it offers every luxury imaginable. And it's not even the only private getaway used by the president. In January 2024, reporting tied to the Dacia Center pointed to a heavily guarded residence in Karelia near Finland. It has helipads and yacht piers, and even a waterfall pulled into a protected zone. Now zoom out to the elite as a class. The sanctions after February 2022 exposed something simple. A lot of Putin's circle lived like a global aristocrats. France seized a yacht linked to Igor Sechin when it tried to leave port. The US Justice Department went after a $300 million super yacht connected to Suleiman Kerimov. Maintaining that one seized yacht, Amadea, now cost the US government millions per year. That's the level of hedonism these people are used to. And this is where nuclear threats start to look more like theater. Russian state TV hosts and loyal propagandists have been doing the nuclear routine for years. In 2014, Dmitry Kiselyov famously said Russia could turn the United States into radioactive ash. 5 years later, Russian state TV listed US targets after one of Putin's warnings. In April 2024, Kiselyov repeated the same nuclear threats. For the domestic audience, it's a status song. We're mighty, we're feared, the world must respect us. For the foreign audience, it's a warning. Don't help Ukraine too much. Don't cross this line. Don't give us a reason to use that weapon. That's how a school bully brags that his big brother just got out of prison. That he'll come and show everyone who's the boss here if they don't behave. Even if that brother is real, the bully doesn't actually want him to come to school and start a real fight, because a real fight brings teachers, police, cameras, and consequences. The bully wants the rumor to do the work, even if he orders it. Now, let's assume the hard scenario. Putin gives an order. Will it be followed? A nuclear launch is not like stealing an election or jailing an opponent. It is not reversible. It is not deniable. The people who would carry out that order would be signing their own death warrant, because the retaliation is certainly to follow. That creates a weird kind of safety catch. Not a technical one, a human one. And we've already seen in smaller ways that loyalty in this system is conditional. In June 2023, the Wagner mutiny showed armed men could seize a military headquarters in Rostov-on-Don and drive toward Moscow, and other military units will do little to stop them. There's no single obedient war machine. Now, add the elite's motivations. If the choices obey a suicidal order or remove one aging ruler, the better odds at survival option is obvious. Then there's the second question. Can everything even work the way it's advertised? Russia has serious nuclear experts, but delivery systems are industrial products. They need maintenance, testing, money, and competent factories. And we have at least one recent visible sign of trouble. In September 2024, satellite imagery revealed a failed test of Russia's newest nuclear missile, RS-28 Sarmat at Plisetsk, with a large crater at the silo. Most likely, the missile exploded while still in. The risk is not zero. Even if one particular missile is faulty, Russia still has a large nuclear arsenal and multiple delivery methods. But the Sarmat story is useful in another way. It shows that the Kremlin's nuclear image is also a propaganda product. It's meant to look flawless, modern, and unstoppable. Reality is more uneven. And now look at the public mood inside Russia. In June 2025, only 24% of Russians believed that nuclear use in Ukraine could ever be justified, while 65% said it couldn't. These numbers show that the social base for nuclear escalation is small, more of a fringe opinion than a roaring wave. So here's the bottom line. The Russian nuclear threat is very real as a tactic of coercion. But the motivation to actually use nukes is weak at all levels inside Russia. Even if Putin orders a strike, his close circle will be trying to save themselves. They want to keep their palaces, their families, their money, and their exit plans. Nuclear war destroys all of that in one move. Russians, even at the top, are not some monsters ready to wipe out the world when they can have it their way. They are merely short-sighted rulers who trapped themselves in a war they can't win. Now, they keep raising the stakes to buy time and negotiate for a better outcome. So the sane approach is to see the nuclear threat for what it is, a bluff. Look at the actions, not just words. Don't freeze only because someone shouts. Now, I want to hear from you. And yes, I really do read the comments. Did the nuclear threat shape your childhood? And if it did, how did it influence you later in life? If you want more analysis like this, without slogans, without fear-mongering, and without pretending the world is simple, please like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who still hears nuclear and shuts down. And if you like to support this channel, you can use SuperThanks or PayPal. Every bit helps keep this work independent. And one more thing. If you want the behind-the-scenes research for my upcoming novel, The Snow Queen Spring, scenes, sources, and the human details that don't always fit into a YouTube video, you'll find my newsletter in the description. Thank you for watching. If you want to try my Heritage DNA, it's $29 and free shipping with my code Elvira. Use the code below in the description and the first pinned comment and grab the bundle.